In the heart of Lagos, where noise never sleeps and secrets hide in plain sight, there stood a barber's shop, small, silent, and yet always full. But no clippers buzzed, no scissors snipped, just whispers and something else you couldn't quite name. They say the barber didn't cut hair. He cut something deeper. They say you left lighter, emptier, not knowing what you lost until it was too late. And one day, an alpha came knocking, the kind of man no one dared to say no to. But what he bought would cost him more than money, more than power, more than life. This isn't just a story. It's a warning. Stay with me and don't blink. Because the moment you do, you just might forget what you came with. They called him the Barber of Oberland, not because he gave the cleanest fades or the freshest tapers, but because nobody ever saw a mirror in his shop. There were no clippers on his table, no scissors, no combs, no gels or powders. Only one rusty chair, old enough to remember independence. The walls were bare, save for one thing, a small, hand-painted sign that read, "Breathe in, breathe out, leave different." His salon stood quietly between a buka and a bet-9 shop on a street that never slept. Oberland's chaos roared daily, conductors shouting destinations, beggars singing sermons, suya smoke twisting in the air like spirits looking for a body. Yet his shop stood still in the noise, like a mute in a choir. Nobody remembered when it opened. Some said it had always been there. No name on the glass. No price list. No barbing pole turning red and white. And still, the place was never empty. People came from all over Lagos. Some entered shaking with anxiety, some reeking of guilt, some humming nonsense as if driven by voices only they could hear. And when they came out, they were different, quieter, calm, almost empty, like something had been taken from them, or left behind. It was Mama Ronk, the pepper seller, who first whispered it. "I don't know what that man is cutting. Oh, it's not hair. It's something else. Maybe from inside your head." She wasn't wrong, because no matter who went in, man, woman, agbero, or banker, none ever came out with a visible change in their hair. Not even one line. And yet, some swore it was the best cut they ever had. The man himself was strange. Nobody knew his name. Nobody had ever seen him outside the shop. He was always inside, always wearing a white shirt with sleeves rolled up, always barefoot, always quiet. He didn't smile. He didn't joke. He didn't speak unless he did first. Even then, he answered like a man, trying not to wake something sleeping deep inside him. People asked, who trained him? Where is he from? Is he deaf? Is he even alive? They called him many names: Ghost Barber, Wind Man, Whisper Boy. But the name that stuck? The Air Seller. The name began one rainy evening when Cunnel, the lottery agent, came running from the shop, laughing and weeping all at once. People gathered. He shouted, "I saw her. I saw my sister. She forgave me." Nobody knew what he meant. His sister, Mope, had died 3 years before, stabbed during a cult clash in school. They said Cunnel had refused to pay her school fees, even though he had the money. She dropped out. She mixed with the wrong crowd. She died. That night, Cunnel didn't go home. He slept outside the barber's shop, on the wet pavement, with a grin on his face and dried tears on his cheeks. In the morning, he was gone. Vanished. Only his phone was found. Its screen showed a single voice note, unsent. A woman's voice, soft and haunting, saying, "I forgive you, Cunnel, but you shouldn't have breathed it in." People laughed it off at first, called it madness, stress, juju withdrawal. But then it happened again, and again. More people entering and leaving changed. Some grew distant from their families. Some lost interest in money. Some claimed to see things, shadows moving ahead of them, voices calling in their dreams, faces in the mirror that weren't their own. One woman, Saad, a known runs girl, came out and threw her iPhone into the gutter. She said, "I don't need it anymore. I've seen the real screen, the one inside my chest." She disappeared 2 days later. Her roommate said she left behind a single envelope filled with feathers. Nothing else. At first, the police ignored the complaints. There were no crimes, after all. Just whispers, rumors, and odd behavior. But things began to change when a top civil servant from Ikoyi came to the shop. He entered at 1 11:07 p.m. By 2 p.m., he was found walking along Eco Bridge barefoot, singing nursery rhymes and begging Danfo drivers for air. His family tried to cover it up. Doctors said he had a breakdown, but insiders said he was carrying a small nylon bag with nothing inside. He told them, "The air is in here. My destiny is in this bag. I bought it with my shame." He never recovered. He now lives in a private psychiatric hospital in VGC. Heavily sedated, eyes always staring at the ceiling as if waiting for something to fall. As the tales grew darker, a single question echoed across Oberland. What is the barber selling? Some said peace. Some said souls. Some said memories. But one old Malum who sold herbal bitters swore it was more than that. He said, "I saw him one night when the world was sleeping. A man came in crying. I heard them whisper. When he came out, he had no shadow. Nobody believed him. Until one boy, curious and foolish, snuck into the shop at night and tried to record the inside with his phone. The next day, his phone was found melted. He hasn't spoken since. Only draws spirals in the sand and repeats. There is no air. There is only the taking." And yet, despite the growing horror, the shop remained. People still came, because Lagos is full of pain, and the barber offered relief, a strange, silent kind, even if it meant giving up something you couldn't name, even if it meant never being whole again, even if it meant being less, because somehow, being less felt better than being full of pain. But one day, a presence darker than pain arrived in Oberland. He came in a convoy of black jeeps, men with guns, eyes like cutlass blades. He wasn't looking for a fade. He wasn't looking for peace. He was looking for control. They called him the Alpha, and he came to the barber's door not to be healed, but to own what the barber sold. And that's when everything truly began. His name was never spoken twice. The first time was a warning. The second time was a death sentence. In the underworld of Lagos, they called him the Alpha, a title earned not by age or birth, but by the number of bodies he left behind. He ran rackets from Lekki to Ladipo, controlled ports without touching salt water, and made billionaires kneel to kiss his ring. He was the man that politicians feared in the dark and the devil respected in prayer. And yet, for the first time in his life, he felt empty. It wasn't money. It wasn't enemies. It wasn't the blood on his hands or the screams in his sleep. It was something deeper, something missing, a hunger that wealth couldn't feed. That's when he heard the whispers, not from a rival, not from a friend, but from an oracle. The Alpha's oracle was not the type found in dusty shrines or painted with chalk and palm oil. He was a clean-shaven man who lived in a glass apartment in Banana Island and only spoke when paid in tears. Real tears, the kind born of pain. And that night, as thunder roared like ancestral drummers across Lagos sky, the Alpha stood before the oracle, shirtless, eyes hollow. "I can't sleep," he said. The oracle lit a white candle that burned blue. "Your sleep is not missing," he said. "Your air is." The Alpha frowned. "I can buy the air in this country." The oracle smiled slowly, sadly. "Not this air. This one is taken." Then he leaned in and whispered, "Go to Oberland. There's a man who sells it. But don't go as a king. Go as a beggar, if you dare." The next day he went. The entire street froze the moment the convoy appeared. 3 matte black Land Cruisers, tinted windows, armed men with unblinking eyes. Oberland had seen madness, but this was different. A silence heavier than fear settled like dust on the streets. Even the Danfo conductors stopped shouting. The Alpha stepped out alone. No chains, no sunglasses, just black. Black shirt, black trousers, black aura. He walked past the buka, past the betting shop, and stopped before the shop with no name. The one with the sign, "Breathe in, breathe out, leave different." He paused. The door opened without a touch, as if it had been expecting him. Inside, the room was dim. No bulbs, only a soft, pulsing glow from the ceiling. Not like light, but like memory. Like childhood. Like the sun you remember, not the one you see. The barber stood still, barefoot as always. The Alpha stepped in, towering over him, filling the room with power. "Cut me," he said. The barber didn't reply. He pointed at the chair. The Alpha hesitated. He had sat in chairs worth more than houses, thrones with gold trims. This one looked like it had been rescued from a landfill. But he sat, slowly, and the moment he did, he exhaled. He hadn't meant to, but it came out like wind rushing out of a broken gate. The chair creaked once. The barber stood behind him, silent. No tools in hand, no mirror in front, only the stillness of ritual. And then the air changed. The alpha felt light. No, not light. Loosened. Like something inside him, something old and heavy, had shifted. Memories flickered in his mind like dusty home videos. His mother, humming while cooking agbono. His first stolen phone, hidden in a shoebox. The first man he stabbed. The last man he forgave. Tears gathered in his eyes. He wiped them away with anger. What did you take? The barber said nothing. Just walked around him once and placed a small bag on his lap. A nylon bag. Empty. Your heir, the barber whispered, and the alpha shivered. He didn't remember leaving the shop. One moment he was staring at the nylon. The next he was inside his car, windows fogged, men staring at him like he'd returned from the dead. He clutched the nylon to his chest like it was sacred. What's in the bag, boss? His driver asked. He didn't answer. He just said, drive. And he didn't speak again that day. That night he slept. No gun under his pillow. No dreams of blood or betrayal. Just deep, black, endless sleep. And when he woke, he smiled. He had not smiled in 10 years. The next day, he went again. Alone. His men protested. Oga, it's not safe. Let's clear the area. He ignored them. He returned to the chair like a worshiper to altar. This time, the barber didn't wait. He placed the nylon on his lap first, then walked behind him and began to breathe. Not loud, not heavy, just present. And the alpha began to remember things he didn't know he had forgotten. The smell of rust on his father's cutlass. The prayers whispered under his breath during his first robbery. The moment he realized fear and respect were twins. He left the shop in silence again, this time with 2 nylon bags, both still empty, but heavier than diamonds. And then it became a routine. Every 3 days, the alpha would come, sit, breathe, leave. The men under him noticed. He wasn't shouting as much. He canceled 2 planned hits. He donated to an orphanage anonymously. He called his sister in Abaddon for the first time in 15 years. Something in him was changing. But power doesn't like change, especially not in Lagos. One of his lieutenants, Tiga, grew suspicious. Followed him one night. Saw him enter the barber's shop. Waited 2 hours. Watched him leave, barefoot, holding nothing. And then, Tiga never reported back. His phone was found the next morning in 3rd Mainland Lagoon. Wrapped in nylon. Empty, just like the others. The rest of the crew grew fearful. They began to whisper, Ogadon, give him soul. The barber day collects spirits. Not jazz. But the alpha didn't stop, because each visit made the darkness in his chest smaller. Each breath lighter. And he needed that peace. Desperately. He needed to feel like a man again. But everything has a cost. And the more air he bought, the less of himself remained. He began forgetting names. Forgetting faces. Forgetting deals. His grip on power loosened. And in the shadows of Lagos, vultures waited. One day, after his 9th visit, he entered his mansion and couldn't remember where his bedroom was. He wandered for an hour, then sat in his kitchen, holding the nylon bag, staring into nothing. His guards found him there at dawn, eyes wide, hands trembling, whispering the same word over and over again. Empty. But it was too late. The barber had taken something. Not just air, not just memory, but weight. The weight that made him alpha. The blood, the violence, the dominance. It was gone, and others were circling. The city was shifting. The police, too, had started watching. They didn't understand what was happening yet. But bodies were missing. Voices were gone. Phones were melting. And one inspector, young, stubborn, unafraid, had begun to suspect something unnatural on the streets of Abilene. Something connected to a barber who sold nothing. And a man who once ruled Lagos, but now clutched nylon bags like they were lungs. The air was changing. The hunt had begun. And this time, even the faceless couldn't hide. It wasn't money. It wasn't goods. It wasn't gold, blood, or anything that could be stored in a vault. What the barber sold was air, but not the kind you breathe, not the kind that lifts lungs and cools sweat. This air was different. It came from within. It was memory, regret, pain, guilt, secrets buried so deep they poisoned you from the inside. It was the weight people carried, and the barber had learned how to take it. Not with scissors, not with force, but with stillness, silence, and something older than language. In a room behind a shop, a room no one ever saw, the barber kept jars. Empty glass jars. Hundreds of them, each labeled with a date and a name. Some names had no vowels. Some were just numbers. Some weren't names at all. Just symbols, drawings, things scratched by trembling fingers. When the barber removed someone's weight, it didn't vanish. It had to go somewhere. So he bottled it, stored it, preserved it. Because weight doesn't die. It only moves. And someday, someone would want to buy it. Not everyone left the shop the same way. Some people never left at all. They would sit in the chair, exhale, and collapse. Peaceful. Gone. As if the removal of pain had also removed their reason to be. Others left smiling, only to be found days later talking to walls or digging into their own skin, looking for something they couldn't name. The barber didn't warn them, didn't stop them, because he wasn't running a therapy session. He was running a business. He learned the trade from a woman called Mother Adese. Nobody knew who she was, not even the barber. He met her as a child, under a bridge, during a harmattan morning so cold the sky cracked. She was old, ancient. Her eyes were the color of dried leaves, and her breath smelled like camphor and sorrow. She taught him how to listen, how to sit so still that people poured themselves into you, how to hear their air, the invisible sound between the heartbeat and the sigh. And then she taught him how to take it. She called it harvesting the hollow. But there was a warning. You must never take too much from one man, she said, brushing his dreadlocks with burnt cowrie shells. Too much, and they become something else. Empty things are dangerous. They become hungry. He never understood. Not until the Alpha returned for the 10th time. The Alpha now looked like a ghost in designer clothes. Gaunt, eyes sunken, fingers twitching. He had not spoken to his lieutenants in days. He had not touched his phones. He didn't even know who he had become. He sat in the barber's chair, trembling. More, he said. The barber paused. He had seen this before. The edge. The point of no return. Are you sure? The Alpha's lips cracked. I'm not done until I forget my name. The barber said nothing, just nodded once, then placed the jar, and began to breathe. Outside, the air in Oberlin changed. The sky turned a deeper shade of gray. The buchan next door closed early. The Bet Ninjai shop shut its doors. Even the stray dogs avoided the alley, because something was being pulled, sucked, unseen and heavy. And the Alpha, for the first time in his life, cried. Not a gangster's cry, not the tear of pain, but the soundless, heaving cry of a man who has remembered too much and wants to forget it all. And the barber took it all. He shouldn't have, but he did, because the Alpha paid well, not in naira, but in power. You see, every piece of pain held energy, every regret a currency, and the Alpha's life was a vault of wickedness. The barber had never harvested someone so full before. His hands trembled as the jar filled, not with air, but with something black and swirling. He sealed it quickly, too quickly, because the Alpha was slumped over, eyes closed, breathing slow, and smiling. He had reached the bottom. There was nothing left in him. He had become hollow, and now dangerous. That night, the jar glowed. It pulsed in the dark room behind the shop, shaking the shelf, whispering in voices older than the city. The other jars trembled, and the barber, for the first time, locked the door and sat on the ground. He placed the Alpha's jar in front of him and whispered prayers he had not said since childhood, because he had made a mistake. He had taken too much. The next day, police showed up, not in sirens, not in trucks, but in plain clothes. A small team, led by Inspector Ajayi, a woman with tired eyes and the scent of pepper spray on her collar. She had been following the case quietly. Disappearances, behavioral collapses, mysterious healing sessions that ended in madness. No prints, no evidence, just whispers and one melted phone. But the final clue? Tiga, the Alpha's right-hand man, found with a throat full of salt water and lungs filled with air. No water in his body, just air, dry and cold. That wasn't science. That wasn't Lagos. That was something else. Ajayi walked into the barber shop at 2:30 p.m. The chair was empty. The barber stood behind it, barefoot, watching her like he had been waiting. "I want to ask you some questions," she said, flashing her badge. He pointed at the chair. She laughed. "You think I came to cut hair?" He didn't respond, just kept pointing. Curiosity overpowered her. She sat, and that was when she saw, not the shop, not the barber, but herself, her younger self, chasing chickens in her grandfather's compound. The day her mother died. The time she almost shot the wrong man. Moments she had buried under duty, under toughness, under years of police life. They flashed before her eyes, then vanished. She stood quickly, heart pounding. What the hell was that? The barber said nothing, just placed a sealed jar on the table beside her. Labeled, AJYI. She stared. The jar was fogged, like someone had breathed into it on a cold morning. "I'm opening a case against you," she said, voice shaking. He nodded. "I'll be here," he said, finally speaking. His voice was calm, ancient, almost empty. Back at the station, Ajayi ran tests on the jar. No fingerprints. No identifiable particles. No air pressure. Just silence, as if it contained nothing. But she knew. She had felt it. The jar held something she hadn't even known she was carrying. And the barber had taken it like a thief in the night. Weeks passed. Ajayi kept watching him. He never left the shop. Never interacted. Never ate. Never rested. Just stood, waiting. And more people came. They left lighter. Some didn't leave at all. One man walked into traffic after his session, smiling as he was hit. Another moved to Osun to become a monk. One woman donated her house and disappeared into a forest. Whatever the barber was selling, it was real and dangerous. When the city fights back, when the hunter finally sits in the chair, and when the barber meets the one man he cannot help, because he carries a weight even air cannot lift. By now, Oberlin had changed. The street that once danced with horns, megaphones, and Accra sellers had grown quieter around the nameless shop. Drivers stopped honking when passing it. Hawkers crossed to the other side. Even madmen avoided the space. And the locals knew. They stopped calling him Barber. Now, they called him the Collector. It wasn't just the Alpha anymore. People were going missing. Men who entered the shop never returned. Some left physically, yes, walking with smiles and glassy eyes, but their loved ones said the same thing. "That's not my husband. That's not my daughter. That's not the man I married." They had the same skin, the same voice, the same habits, but no fire behind their eyes. Like their soul had missed the bus and their body was pretending to be home. It was a boy named Daniel that changed everything. 15 years old, hyperactive, mouth too sharp for his age, always wearing oversized sneakers and headphones louder than sense. He was dared by his friends to go in. "Just sit on the chair," they laughed. "Come back and tell us if he even moves." Daniel went in laughing. Came out 20 minutes later. No laughter, no movement, no sound. He simply walked down the street, threw his phone into a drainage canal, and kept walking. They found him 3 days later in Ajij, sweeping a mosque barefoot, whispering verses in Arabic. Daniel was Christian. He had never learned Arabic. His mother wailed at the police station. "Something took my child, but what could they arrest? The barber? For what? For breathing?" Inspector Ajayi knew she had to act. The situation was spiraling. The Alpha was completely gone. Still alive, technically, but nothing left of him. His empire had crumbled. His enemies reclaimed territory. And yet he didn't fight. He sat in his mansion with his eyes open, holding a nylon bag as if it contained his breath. Doctors called it catatonia. Ajayi called it possession, because something or someone had collected him, piece by piece. Ajayi gathered a small team, all clean, no bribes, no secrets. She didn't trust anyone else. She showed them footage, what little she had. Street cam of customers entering but never showing signs of a haircut. Body cam footage from a constable who got dizzy and vomited just from standing at the threshold. She presented the jar, still sealed, still fogged. One officer fainted just touching it. This was no ordinary man. And Oberland was no longer just a location. It was a breathing wound in the city. But faceless evil doesn't leave fingerprints. So Ajayi set a trap. They needed someone believable, someone broken, someone desperate, someone the collector would accept. His name was Femi, ex-convict, addict, homeless, always looking for one more shot at redemption or destruction, whichever came first. Ajayi brought him in and made him a deal. Go in, sit, talk, leave. That's all. He looked at the jar on the table. What if he takes my mind? Ajayi smiled. You'd be surprised how little of it most people are using. He laughed, nervously, then agreed. Wired, monitored, watched from 3 vans across the street. The team watched him enter at exactly 3:13 p.m., same time as always, the time when all CCTV footage turned to static. This was their chance to break the pattern. Femi stepped into the shop, paused. The air was thick like something had just cried and not wiped its tears. The collector stood, as usual, in silence. Femi tried to smile. I need a cut, boss. No reply. The chair creaked. Femi sat. Everything went black. In the van, the feed went dead. No sound. No image. Just static, but this time it wasn't noise. It was whispering, repeating, the same phrase. You cannot collect what is already hollow. Ajayi froze, then screamed, pull him out. 2 officers burst into the shop, guns drawn, but there was no one. No Barber. No Femi. Just the chair. And beside it, a nylon bag, tied shut, empty, still warm. Femi was found 3 hours later, in Mushin, sitting on a pile of Bibles and laughing. His eyes were white, no pupils. He kept saying, I saw it. I saw where he keeps them. I saw the jars, they were breathing. Then he collapsed. Doctors called it psychosis. Ajayi called it confirmation. She returned that night alone. No warrant, no team, just her badge, her torchlight, and a silent prayer to any god that still watched Lagos. She entered the shop. No one stopped her. The chair waited. The collector stood behind it, calm. Ajayi pulled out her gun. He didn't flinch. I'm here for the jars, she said. No response. I know what you are. He nodded. That was worse than denial. Where do they go? She asked. The people. Their faces. He finally spoke. They don't need faces where I take them. Where's that? He looked up. Not toward heaven. Toward the ceiling. As if the roof was watching. They go to the place between breaths. Ajayi's mouth went dry. That a joke? No. It's home. Then he stepped aside, revealing a door behind the wall. A door that hadn't been there a second ago. She raised her gun. He whispered, it won't open for you. You still carry your name. Ajayi fled. She didn't remember running. Just waking up at the police station with sand in her shoes and no memory of leaving. Her body cam was fried. Her notes were gone. And the jar she kept in her drawer, now cracked. Fog spilling slowly in her office like breath on a cold window. She requested backup. A federal raid. A full sweep of the block. But when they arrived, the shop was gone. Brick wall. No sign it had ever existed. No chair. No jars. No collector. Just one thing carved into the wall in chalk. He only cuts those ready to be cut. But the faces still vanished. Even after the shop disappeared, people still whispered about the collector. Some say he moved to Surulere. Some say Yaba. Some say he only opens on the nights when the moon hides. Ajayi knows better. She keeps the cracked jar on her desk. It still fogs up every morning, still warm to the touch. And sometimes, late at night when the city sighs, she swears it whispers her name. The collector is still out there, but the city has found its courage, the true cost of air, because not everything we lose is a loss. Sometimes what is taken saves us, but sometimes it opens a gate that should have stayed shut. The Alpha had stopped smiling. His empire, once as impenetrable as the armored cars he rode in, was now cracking like old concrete under Lagos heat. His boys no longer followed him with reverence. His mistresses said he'd become cold, not in the usual way, but lifeless. He slept with his eyes open now. He no longer bled. His reflection refused to meet his gaze. At first, he thought it was spiritual warfare. Hired pastors, called Babalawos, burnt white candles from Ojalegba to Ijibu. But the deeper he reached, the more he heard one phrase whispered back from every mouth. Go back to the barber. The hollowing begins. The Alpha hadn't returned in 2 weeks, but the air inside his mansion felt still, as if it feared movement. His guards started quitting, citing nightmares, illnesses, and ghosts behind the curtains. One night, his right-hand man, Bullet, came in with red eyes and trembling lips. Boss, he whispered, I saw her. Ooh, Chioma, your first wife, the one you strangled. She was in the hallway, breathing out black smoke. The Alpha said nothing. He stared into the whiskey glass in his hand. No reflection, not even a shimmer, just a dull, dry void. I can't stay, Bullet said. Something is wrong with your air. It's heavy, boss. It's like breathing cement. That night, the Alpha stood naked in his room, looked out at the third mainland bridge, and whispered, What did you give me? He knew where to go, and he knew what he had to ask. The return to Oberland. He arrived before dawn. The barbershop hadn't changed. Same faded blue sign. Same cracked window. Same single chair in the middle of the room, lit by that stubborn, flickering bulb. The barber was already there, sweeping nothing. No hair on the floor. No dust. Just a slow ritual of brushing clean tiles. The Alpha entered. The door shut behind him without a creak. I want it back, the Alpha said. The barber didn't look up. You took something from me. Something big. My men are dying. My women have shadows under their skin. I haven't slept. I haven't felt sleep. I need whatever you stole back. The barber finally turned to face him. His face was still the same, calm, unreadable, and too smooth, like memory had forgotten to add pores. You paid for air, the barber said. I never take. I sell. The Alpha slammed his fist on the counter. You lied. You said I'd feel power. You did, the barber replied, sweeping calmly. But power has many layers. You took air from me 7 times. The first took your hate. The second, your fear. The third, your hunger. The fourth, your grief. The fifth, your guilt. The sixth, your pleasure. And the seventh. He paused. The Alpha's chest rose and felt like a building about to collapse. What was the seventh? Your soul. A bargain of breath. The Alpha stood still, silent. Then he laughed. Loud. Harsh. Long. You think I'm afraid of you? He growled. I've buried men for less than what you've said. Burned families for debts smaller than this. You're nothing. Just a street mystic hiding behind clippers and incense. The barber simply walked to the chair. Sit. The Alpha didn't move. Sit. The barber said again, but this time his voice came from inside the Alpha's ears, bypassing his hearing. Something dragged the Alpha forward. Not hands. Not wind. Just will. He sat. The barber raised the mirror, cracked and brown with time. Look, he said, and the Alpha saw himself. Or rather, what was left. No face. No eyes. Just a blank silhouette of heat and black smoke. You traded all your burdens, the barber said, voice soft as death, but forgot that burdens are what make us human. You're nothing now but breath. A gas. A mist of memory. The Alpha's heart pounded, but there was no sound. Even his heartbeat had left him. Give it back, he whispered. Please. There's only one way, said the barber. The Alpha looked up. What? Take one more breath. The final inhalation. The barber brought out a glass jar, sealed with black wax. Inside, nothing, visibly, but the Alpha felt it, like thunder held in a teacup. Something old, something angry. This, the barber said, is your final breath. It will return everything. Your guilt, your rage, your fear, your hunger, all the things that made you Alpha. But it comes with a curse. The Alpha didn't ask. He didn't flinch. He took the jar, opened it, and inhaled deeply. The awakening, the scream that followed wasn't human. It rattled the mirror, cracked the walls. Outside, hawkers on the street clutched their ears and ran. Dogs barked. Birds dropped mid-flight. Inside, the Alpha convulsed. His eyes turned black, then red, then white. His skin tore, healed, then tore again. He stood. His voice returned. I remember everything. And with memory came pain. Chioma's face. His brother's body. His son's lifeless fingers. He dropped to his knees. The barber leaned close. Power is not in forgetting, he whispered. It is in remembering and choosing restraint. The alpha didn't move. His tears soaked the tiles. The barber stepped back and vanished into the shadows. The barber's curse. By morning, the alpha was found in his mansion, kneeling. His eyes open, alive, but not moving. Doctors could not explain it. He was breathing. His heart was beating, but he never spoke again, never blinked, never slept. He simply remained present, like air. The city of Lagos never slept, but that night, a peculiar silence hung over the entire Oberland district. It wasn't natural. It was spiritual. Even hawkers whispered. Even the Danfo drivers slowed down. Word had spread. Something was about to happen. And somehow the air knew. Inspector Salami had prepared for this moment for months. He had seen things in this case that made him question reality, sanity, and even mortality. Men who returned without shadows. Women who coughed up wind and lost their memories. Children who looked into mirrors and saw older versions of themselves screaming from the other side. The barber was not just another man. He was a wound in the fabric of existence. And tonight they were going to stitch him closed. The setup. Salami sat inside a dark, unmarked surveillance van 2 streets away from the barber's shop. He had 4 officers positioned at each possible exit, snipers at roof level, and one very special client already inside the shop. That client was Whale, a trained undercover agent, handpicked for his unique spiritual sensitivity. A born seer. His grandmother had called him Odin, the eye within. For years, Whale had used his gift to crack cases involving cults, spiritual fraud, and unexplained rituals. But never anything like this. Whale had entered the barbershop at exactly 3:13 p.m., the same hour every single CCTV footage always went blank. And at exactly that same time, every screen inside the van went static. The darkness within. Inside, Whale sat on a lone chair in the center of the darkened room. The barber stood behind him, silent. No mirror, no tools, just presence. Whale could feel it. The temperature drop, the thickening of the air, the invisible pressure building in his chest. His ears popped like he was deep underwater. Then came the voice, not from the barber's mouth, but from the walls. You've brought them here with you, officer. Whale blinked, steadying his breath. You sell air, he replied calmly. But what are you really trading? Desperation, greed, secrets. They come to me wanting to forget, wanting power, wanting silence. I give them air. The walls seemed to inhale deeply as he said it. The shop exhaled hot wind from nowhere. Whale tapped twice on the metal beneath his wrist. The signal. His team should have heard it. No response. He tried again. 3 taps this time. Still nothing. He reached for his comms piece. Dead. Back in the van. All communication was lost. No signal. No radio. No visuals. Just static and humming. One of the officers, Sergeant Khalid, began trembling. Sir, I think something is inside this van. Salami turned sharply. What? Something breathing. Behind us. They turned. Nothing. Just a slow, silent wind creeping through the closed vents. And then the screens blinked once. Then again. A third time. Suddenly, all the screens flashed the same image. A face. But not a normal one. It was blurred like wind trapped inside a human mold. No eyes. No lips. Just movement trembling at the edges. And it whispered. He warned you. Then black. Inside the shop again. Whale felt it too. He was no longer alone. The barber was behind him, unmoving, yet everywhere. His presence pressed into Whale's chest like grief. You're not here to cut your hair, the barber whispered now, real and close. You're here to expose what Lagos buried. Whale turned slowly to face him. The barber's face was still featureless, but now, a crack had formed where his mouth should be. It opened like a tear in paper. Would you like to see the alpha's last breath? Whale nodded. The barber raised his hand, palm open. Wind rushed into it from all corners of the room. The lights flickered. The walls bled dust. A glowing sphere of air, swirling violently like a captured hurricane, formed in his grasp. And then, He inhaled it. The room trembled. And for a split second, Whale saw the vision. He stood in a different Lagos. A dry, colorless version. Souls roamed the streets with no feet, no shadows, their mouths open as if screaming, but no sound came out. Children floated above rooftops. Buses drove themselves. The lagoon boiled. At the center of it all was the Alpha, kneeling, eyes wide, mouth stitched shut by wind. And behind him, the barber sat on a throne of hair, laughing with a mouth full of screams. Then Will snapped back. Collapse. His knees buckled. Blood trickled from his nose. The weight of what he had seen almost crushed his sanity. I need to leave, he whispered. The barber tilted his head. You came for air. Take it. And with that, he blew. Just once. Will was thrown backward, crashing into the wall. He gasped, his lungs empty, chest burning. He clawed at nothing, choking. And then, the power returned. Back to reality. All comms came back on. Salami shouted into the headset. Go! Go! Breach now! Officers stormed the barbershop. But it was empty. Will was on the floor, unconscious but breathing. The chair spun slowly. And on the mirrorless wall, someone had written in hair, I only sold what they asked for. Whale recovered in a hospital days later. He couldn't speak. When asked to write what he saw, he drew a spiral, then a face, then a single word. Breath. Salami visited the ruins of the shop, burnt to ashes within hours of the raid. Locals claimed they saw the barber walking toward the third mainland bridge that night, barefoot, carrying a small leather bag that trembled like it held a storm inside. But no one dared stop him, not even the wind. Lagos didn't sleep the night the Alpha died. All across the city, radios crackled with confusion, social media buzzed with grainy clips, and news outlets aired live footage of ambulances gathering outside a mansion in Banana Island. The body of the man once known as Ogunla, the feared Alpha of Lagos, sat slumped in a gold-trimmed armchair, dressed in white lace, barefoot. His eyes were wide open, his pupils blown out. He wasn't dead in the physical sense, but something had left him, something vital. His guards said he hadn't spoken in 3 days. Just breathed, staring at the ceiling, as though listening to something only he could hear. When they shook him, he didn't blink. When they played his favorite Fuji songs, he didn't nod. When they put a knife in his hand, his fingers didn't close. He had air in his lungs, but nothing in his soul. 3:13 a.m., Third Mainland Bridge. A barefoot man in a faded kaftan strolled along the edge of the Third Mainland Bridge, dragging a black leather bag that puffed like it was filled with helium. The wind blew hard, but it avoided him, curling sideways instead of facing his body. The policemen who spotted him weren't expecting a fight. He didn't resist. Name? The inspector asked, flashlight shaking slightly in his hand. The man turned. His face blank. No eyebrows. No eyelashes. No expression. His lips were dry and cracked, like an abandoned road in the north. Do I need one? The man asked, voice calm. What's in the bag? The man smiled and handed it over. When the zip was pulled, there was nothing inside. Yet the moment it opened, all 6 officers heard their own voices screaming back at them. From inside the empty bag, each officer dropped it, backing away in panic. The inspector stepped forward slowly, steadying his breath. You're under arrest for the disappearance of multiple Lagos residents and the psychological destruction of Akin Alabir, known as the Alpha. The barber said nothing, only bowed slightly. Only gave him what he asked for, he whispered. News at 9 o'clock. The broadcast was brief, careful not to disturb the already shaken public. A mysterious barber has been apprehended by Lagos police early this morning in connection to a wave of unexplained disappearances and mental collapses tied to his salon in Oberland. Authorities are currently investigating. The suspect remains in custody. But what the broadcast didn't show was what happened at 3:13 p.m. that same day, when the barber, handcuffed and seated for interrogation, looked at the lead investigator and said, You're breathing in lies. Want me to sell you truth instead? The power in the entire building went out. When it returned 2 minutes later, the room was empty. Only the chair remained, slowly spinning in place. The bag full of air sat neatly on the table, zip closed. 1 week later, the shop at Oberlin had vanished. Literally, there was a patch of dry earth where the building once stood. A woman selling Acura across the road said she heard the wind shout before it disappeared. The inspector resigned. Of the 4 officers who arrested the barber, 2 no longer spoke. 1 disappeared. The last began preaching on street corners, warning people not to breathe too deeply in Lagos. And the alpha? He remained frozen in his chair. Doctors claimed he had suffered an extreme psychological breakdown. But spiritualists had another theory. The man had overdosed on something far worse than cocaine, heroin, or fame. He had overdosed on air. But not just any air. The kind you're not meant to inhale. The kind trapped in forbidden memories. The kind whispered between the living and the dead. The kind only that Barber could sell. On the edge of Makoko, weeks later, a child wandered into an abandoned wooden shack near the water. Inside, she found a broken mirror nailed to the wall and a rusty chair that looked too clean for how dusty the room was. As she turned to leave, a breeze swept through the shack. Then a whisper, "Sit, let me trim your silence." And so, the barber's chair sits empty now. The mirrors gather dust, but some nights, if you pass by that street in Lagos, you'll hear it. The faint rustle of nylon bags, the whisper of breath being stolen, the promise of power that destroyed them all. The alpha is gone. The barber is gone. But the air? The air is still here, waiting for the next one greedy enough to buy it. If you listen till the end, you've already breathed in a little of the story. Be careful what you carry with you tonight. This was the barber who sold air. If you want more stories the world should fear, subscribe now. Because the next tale might be the one you're living.